I'm not gonna lie, this right here feels like one of those moments where you can clearly tell the Chiefs are still trying to figure themselves out. Because at the exact same time you're seeing projections of this team possibly going all in on the draft to rebuild key positions, you're also hearing very real conversations about bringing in outside help right now to fix what's not working. And that combination says a lot about where this team is mentally. I'm Victor, and if you've been following this team closely like I have, you know this isn't just about adding talent. This is about urgency, because after a disappointing season, the Chiefs don't have the luxury of waiting around for everything to develop slowly, especially on offense. Because on one side, you've got the draft scenario where Kansas City is being linked to players like Carnell Tate, a receiver they've already shown strong interest in, and who could be a long-term solution for this offense, which tells you the front office is clearly thinking about the future and trying to rebuild this roster the right way. But at the same time, there's another conversation happening that hits way closer to right now, because there are already trade ideas floating around that could bring in a guy like Jordan Addison, someone who could step in immediately and become one of the most reliable options in this passing game from day one, especially with all the uncertainty surrounding this receiver group. And that's what makes this moment so important, because this team is basically choosing between patience and urgency, between developing young talent through the draft or making a move that could change the offense instantly. And depending on which direction they go, it could completely reshape what this season is going to look like. So in today's video, we're going to break down both sides of this situation, what each move really means for the Chiefs, and why this decision might be one of the most important ones we've seen in a long time. And real quick, if you're enjoying this kind of breakdown and you follow the Chiefs every single day like I do, go ahead, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and help us reach 2,100 subscribers, because we're getting really close, and I want you here with me when we hit that mark. Alright, so when we really break down what's going on here with this first report, this is one of those situations that might not look like a massive move on the surface. But when you connect all the dots, it actually says a lot about how the Chiefs are viewing their offense right now, and more importantly, how uncomfortable they might be with the current state of their wide receiver room. Because the reality is, Kansas City does have young talent at the position, with guys like Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, and Tyquan Thornton. But when you look a little deeper, you start to see why this conversation about bringing in a veteran has even started in the first place, since none of these players has truly established himself as a consistent, reliable option over the course of a full season, whether due to injuries, inconsistent production, or even off-field concerns. And that's where the name Odell Beckham Jr. comes into the picture, because even though he's not the same player he was years ago, the fact that the Chiefs are being linked to him already tells you that this front office is at least exploring the idea of adding experience, stability, and a different kind of presence to this offense, especially in a moment where they're trying to bounce back and get back into contention. But at the same time, as a fan, you can't just look at the name and get excited without thinking about the context, because Beckham hasn't been on the field in over a year. His last real production was extremely limited, and he spent the entire 2025 season out of the league, which naturally raises questions about what he can realistically bring at this stage of his career. So what you're really looking at here is not a guaranteed solution, but more of a calculated gamble, where the upside is tied to experience and leadership, but the risk comes from uncertainty about performance, conditioning, and how quickly he could actually contribute if he were to join this team. And honestly, that's what makes this whole situation feel a little uneasy, because it highlights something that a lot of fans have already been feeling, which is that this offense still doesn't have that clear identity at the wide receiver position, still doesn't have that one dependable presence you can count on in critical moments. And that's a problem for a team that expects to compete at the highest level every single year. At the same time, you can also understand the logic behind even considering a move like this, because if you're the Chiefs and you know your quarterback is coming back from injury, the last thing you want is to put him in a situation where he's once again dealing with inconsistency, dropped passes, and a lack of chemistry in key moments. So, in a way, this news isn't just about Odell Beckham Jr. It's about what his name represents, which is a front office actively searching for answers, trying to stabilize a position that clearly hasn't been good enough, and looking for any possible way to raise the floor of this offense heading into the next season. And that's exactly why this becomes even more interesting when you start to look at what else is happening around this team right now, because while they're considering a veteran like Beckham to bring experience into the room, There's also another possibility on the table that could take this offense in a completely different direction, and that one might be even more impactful than this. Now, when you shift your attention to this second report, this is where things start to feel a lot more aggressive, a lot more intentional, and honestly, a lot more aligned with what this team actually needs right now if they truly want to get back into contention as soon as possible. Because unlike the first situation, where the idea was bringing in a veteran like Odell Beckham Jr. as more of a stabilizing presence, what's being discussed here with Jordan Addison is something completely different, since this would be a move focused on immediate production, long-term upside, and giving Patrick Mahomes a legitimate weapon who can grow within this offense instead of just filling a temporary gap. And when you really look at Addison's profile, you start to understand why this kind of move is even being talked about. Because even though he hasn't crossed that 1,000-yard mark yet in his career, the production is there, the talent is obvious, and the numbers back it up with 175 receptions, 396 yards, and 22 touchdowns in just 3 seasons, which for a young receiver still developing says a lot about his potential impact. At the same time, this isn't being framed as a perfect move without risk, and that's important to understand as a fan, because there are real concerns around consistency, especially with drops last season and also some off-field questions that, when you combine everything together, explain why a player with this level of talent could realistically be available in trade discussions. But here's where things start to get really interesting from the Chiefs' perspective, because financially and strategically, this is the type of move that actually makes a lot of sense, since Addison would cost just around $2.6 million next season, which is incredibly low for a receiver who could realistically step in as a strong WR2 right away, and the team would still have control over him with a manageable option in 2027. And when you connect that with the bigger picture, you realize this wouldn't just be about adding another name to the roster. This would be about giving Mahomes a reliable target the moment he steps back on the field after his injury, especially in a scenario where Rashee Rice could miss time again due to ongoing off-field issues, which only increases the urgency to solidify this receiving group. At the same time, what makes this conversation even more strategic is the potential cost of the trade itself, because instead of giving up a first-round pick, there's a real possibility that a second-round selection, like pick number 40, could be enough to get a deal done, which would allow the Chiefs to still address other major needs like pass rush, cornerback, and offensive tackle in the first round without compromising their overall roster-building plan. So from a fan perspective, this is the kind of move that feels a lot more exciting, because it's not just about fixing a problem, it's about elevating the offense. It's about giving Mahomes someone who can create separation, make plays, and actually change the dynamic of this passing game from week 1. Now, when you put both of these situations side by side, that's when the bigger picture really becomes clear. Because on one hand, you have the idea of bringing in a veteran like Beckham, which signals caution, experience, and a short-term patch. But on the other hand, you have a move like Addison, which represents ambition, long-term planning, and a clear push to rebuild this offense with players who can grow alongside the franchise quarterback. And honestly, that combination tells you everything you need to know about where the Chiefs are right now, because this is not a team that's comfortable. This is not a team that feels complete. This is a team that knows it needs to make the right decisions quickly if it wants to get back to competing at the highest level. So the way I see it, this moment feels less like a stable phase and much more like a turning point, where the front office has to decide whether they want to play it safe or take a real step forward. And depending on what they choose, it could define not just the next season, but the direction of this team for the next few years. And as a fan, that brings a mix of excitement and concern at the same time, because while there's clearly a path to getting this team back on track, there's also very little margin for error, and that's exactly why every move from here on out is going to matter more than ever. And when you take a step back and really look at everything that's happening right now, it becomes impossible to ignore the bigger message behind these moves, because this isn't just about one player or one position. This is about a team that clearly understands it, fell short, and is now trying to respond in a way that puts it right back into the fight as quickly as possible. Because the first situation showed a front office that is at least considering stability, experience, and short-term solutions to calm down a wide receiver room that has been anything but reliable, while this second scenario with Addison points in a completely different direction, one that is far more aggressive, far more strategic, and honestly, much more aligned with building something sustainable around Patrick Mahomes moving forward. And that contrast is exactly what makes this moment so important, because it reveals a team that is still deciding its identity, still trying to balance urgency with long-term planning, and still searching for the right formula to maximize a roster that, not long ago, was one of the most feared in the entire league. From a fan perspective, that creates a mix of emotions, because on one side there's real hope that the right move, especially something like bringing in a young talent with upside, could completely change the trajectory of this offense. But on the other side, there's also that concern that if the wrong decision is made, this team could once again find itself dealing with the same issues that held it back before. So overall, this doesn't feel like a comfortable moment. This feels like a decisive one, where every move carries weight, every decision has consequences, and the margin for error is smaller than it has been in years, which only makes the next steps from this front office even more critical. And as a fan, all you can really do right now is watch closely, hope they get it right, and understand that whatever happens next is going to say a lot about what this team truly believes it is capable of. Now I want to hear from you, because this is one of those situations where every opinion matters. Would you rather see the Chiefs go after a proven veteran to stabilize the offense, or make a bold move for a younger receiver with upside and build something stronger for the future? If you enjoyed this breakdown and you follow the Chiefs every single day like we do here, go ahead and leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and help us reach 2,100 subscribers, because we're getting really close. And I want you to be part of this journey as we grow this community together.